The Testimony of Fairies from an old Irish priest. We now pass directly to West Ireland, in many ways our most important field, of all places in the Celtic world, where the fairy faith is still vigorously alive, and it seems very fitting to offer the first opportunity to testify in behalf of that district to a scholarly priest of the Roman Church, for what he tells us is almost wholly the result of his own memories and experiences as an Irish boy in Connemara, and supplemented in a valuable way by his wider and more mature knowledge of the fairy belief as he sees it now among his own parishioners. The Knockmar Fairies. Knockmar is said to contain excavated passages and a place where the fairies live, and with them the people that they have taken. Where is Liam Neeson when you need him? And from inside of the hill there is believed to be an entrance to an underground world. I have to add something here. You see temples, mounds, and caves, and I have gained a bird's eye view. I see many gates or entrances to the same underworld location. It is a common opinion that after consumptives die, meaning a person with a wasting disease, they are there with the fairies in good health. The wasted body is not taken into the hill, for it was usually regarded as not the body of the deceased, but rather as that of a changeling. The general belief being that the real body and the soul are carried off together, and those of an old person from fairyland are substituted. The old person that is left behind soon declines and dies. The next section reminds me of Tolkien, but also the elements of the Exodus. The name Nazgul, Nazg, means ring, and Gul means wraith or spirit, but it is not Nazgul, it is Nazg-ul. Ul is cognate with L and O, and O is in relation to the devil, the Ouroboros, the dragon's circle. The Nazgul are introduced as black riders, and also called ring wraiths. Very similar to the seven, the Nazgul are referred to as the Dark Riders, or the Nine Riders, or simply the Nine. And in a very similar notion, they would be the Dark Ones from the Ring Wraiths. The scene in question would be where the Dark Riders cannot cross the river, very similar to Exodus. Crossing a stream and the fairies. When out on a dark night, if pursued by fairies or ghosts, one would be considered quite safe if one can get over some stream. I remember coming home on a dark night with a boy companion, and bearing a noise. We had run to a stream, and after crossing it, we felt quite safe. The Fairy Preserve. A heap of stones in a field should not be disturbed, especially if they are part of an ancient tumulus, though they were used for building. Unknown to most, the majority of the farmers' walls in Britain, which are built around the fields, were taken from the mound. The fairies are said to live inside the pile, and to move the stones would be most unfortunate. If a house happens to be built on a fairy preserve or in a fairy track, the occupants will have no luck. Their children will fall sick, and no end of trouble will come on them. When the house happens to have been built in a fairy track, the front and back door, or the windows, if they are in line with the track, cannot be kept closed at night, for the fairies must march through. Near to Ballinrobe there is an old fort, which is still the preserve of the fairies, and also the land around it. The soil is very fine, and yet no one would dare cultivate it. Some time ago, when laying out a new road, the engineers were determined to run the road through the fort, but the people arose, almost in rebellion, and the course of the road had to be changed. To plant life, the red clay is a fertilizer. By definition, and in reality, it must be a biological form of decay. Remember that in the Norse culture, the bones refer to the body of the Titan, Ymir. And in the Chinese culture, they would be the bones of the dragon. To plant life, it is a fertilizer. To humanity, it is known as plowing up poison. Very similar to the Native American Indians. We are told, in an Irish accent, that the ground is sour. And this would be the dead, organic matter, and death would be the lord of the flies. Fairies as flies. There is an old abbey on the river in County Mayo, which means plain of the yew trees. And people say that fairies had a great battle near it, and the slaughter was tremendous. During this time, the fairies appeared as swarms of flies, coming from every direction to that spot. It sounds like the plague of locusts, or the biblical fallen angels. The yew tree and the ash tree, they both relate to the fairies, and they are not native to Egypt. They come down from the north. Some of the fairies came from Knockmar, and some from South Ireland. The battle lasted a day and a night, and when it was over, one could have filled baskets with the dead flies that floated down the river. The Red Rivers and the Lord of Flies. The biblical red rain has been tested, and it is filled with living cells. Those who return from Fairy. Persons who are in a short trance state of 2 or 3 days duration are said to be away with the fairies, enjoying a festival. The festival may be very material in its nature, or it may be purely spiritual. Sometimes one may thus go to Fairy for an hour or two, or one may remain there for 7, 14, or 21 years. And that would be crossing the boundary. The mind of a person coming out of fairyland is usually blank as to what has been seen or done there. Another idea is that the person knows well enough all about fairyland, but is prevented from communicating the knowledge. I do wonder if the book was used as trickery, enabling the author to communicate the secret knowledge. A man may remain awake at night to watch one who has been to fairyland, to see if that person holds a communication with fairies. This would be very similar to possession. Others say, in such a case, the fairies know that you are on alert and will not be discovered.